Good evening and welcome to tonight's show. I'm your host, Tina Dawson, the owner of True Blue Designs, and it's truly an honor to be before you this evening. And I thank you for tuning in. Please like and share and let everyone know that we are on the air. We are live on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel at True Blue Designs. Also, I want to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have been posting content since 2020, so there's a lot of information out there on a variety of topics. Also, press the notification bell so that you can be updated when new content becomes available. Now, early voting in Georgia began on Tuesday, May 2nd, and Election Day is Tuesday, May 24th. I encourage everyone to exercise your right to vote. Why? Because your vote is your voice. Tonight's guest is one of 5 Democratic candidates on the ballot for Georgia Secretary of State. He is here to discuss his platform and to answer questions from you, the viewers. Please help me give a warm welcome to tonight's guest, Dr. John Eaves. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm still not used to all this modern 21st century technology here. I'm doing great. Thank you so much for providing me with an opportunity to be on your show and to speak to your audience. And so I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much for being here. This is the first time we have had a candidate on the show, so I am very excited. We talked a little bit about your platform and you running for Georgia Secretary of State, and I wanted to, bring you on the show so that you can talk to the viewers and maybe they can have ask questions during the show of you, and you'll be able to give them answers. So we're going to start by allowing you to tell the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, Tina, I am a person who has service in my DNA, mostly because of my family.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, born and raised there, went to a very dynamic school in Jacksonville called Rains High School, was a pretty well-rounded student there, along with majoring in, or along with doing well academically. I was a three-sport letterman, played football, soccer, and wrestled.
Oh, wow.
But just as importantly, I began my interest in community service and in interacting in the community as a junior and a senior in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And when it came to go to college, of the 3,000, 4,000 colleges and universities in the country, I just applied to one, and that was the Morehouse College, because of a lengthy family lineage of many my father, uncles, cousins who had gone there, and of course the tradition of Morehouse. And so that's where I really cut my teeth there. Played football, was a mathematics major. I had an uncle who was a very involved politician in Atlanta named Reginald Eaves, who was the first Black police chief and ultimately a Fulton County commissioner. He became my political mentor. And as they say, the rest is history. I became chairman of Fulton County in 2006. Obviously, before that, graduated from Morehouse, went to Yale University, got my PhD, then again, went to politics and served for 11 years as the chairman of Fulton County, which is the largest county in the state of Georgia in terms of population. Yeah. And so those were the seeds, and that was the evolution. And I'm very excited about running for Secretary of State of Georgia.
Well, let's talk a little bit about you being a Fulton County Chairman. Can you explain what were some of your duties and responsibilities of being a chairman?
Yeah, I mean, so you're literally chairman of the board of commissioners. And so county government is overseen by commissioners.
Mm-hmm.
That's every county government in the state of Georgia. And county government is the least understood type of government. Most people identify with the city, even though they live within a county, but they always say, I live in Norcross, I live in Atlanta, I live in Sandy Springs. I live in Lawrenceville, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And then they may say after the city, they may say I live in Gwinnett County.
Right.
But county government is an extension of state government, and it provides a well-rounded amount of services, social services, public health, criminal justice, elections.
Okay.
So as chairman of Fulton County, we were the governors. We were like the board of directors in
Mm-hmm.
terms of overseeing. And for me as chair, I was the official spokesperson for the county. Whenever there was something that happened, good, bad, and ugly, I had to be the face of the county government. I signed off on official documents. I was responsible for the budget, but it was a big job.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't, again, think about county government, but its reach is very expansive, and it's a very important job in terms of delivering services to citizens.
Okay. And can you discuss a little bit about what were some of your goals and accomplishments while having that position?
Well, Tina, I'm going to sound like I'm bragging now.
That's all right.
Yeah. So first of all, I was the second Black person elected as chairman of Fulton County.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In 2006, and probably one of the longest serving chairs of Fulton County. So I served for close to 11 years. And when I assumed office, a crisis evolved right almost immediately. And Grady Hospital, which is one of the most important hospitals in the region, not to mention just Atlanta and Fulton County. Well, it was about to close in 2008, and that was my first test of leadership. And we developed a plan. It's very contentious. A lot of people did not like it, but ultimately it was a public-private partnership that got created. So that's probably the crowning jewel of accomplishments. The other accomplishments, we passed the first ever transportation SPLOST that funded about maybe $600 million worth of transportation projects in the county. We passed a $276 million library capital bond that funded a lot of libraries. Did criminal justice reform. Did the first ever what's called an expungement summit, record restriction summit. Sealed the records of ex-offenders. Did a lot in the area of criminal justice reform. Was one of the most popular My Brother's Keepers initiative. So under the President Obama administration, he launched the My Brother's Keeper program to stop the school to prison pipeline for Black and brown boys. And so I signed on and organized it, and was recognized by the Obama administration as having one of the most important in the country. And we did a lot in terms of homelessness and senior services. So it was really it was an outstanding experience that I had as chairman of Fulton County. And last but not least, we also were responsible for elections. So there were roughly 600,000 people in Fulton County under during my tenure who were registered to vote in Fulton County. And we were one of the first governments to do souls to the polls, which allowed for people after Sunday or Saturday worship to go to vote. And we were also one of the first governments to do 3 weeks in advance voting. So it's become so popular now, people forget that just a few years ago, you just voted on one day.
Yeah.
And so this whole new concept was introduced to me and my colleagues, and it's like, whoa, voting early? Is your vote going to count? Yeah, it was, and so we had to actually sell it, and it really came from the Obama presidency in 2007 or 8, one of the two, where there was such a big turnout and so many massive lines on election day. The idea came, okay, how can you make it less stressful and crowded on one day? And so the concept of doing it early began to come up, and Fulton County was one of the first, and that was during my tenure as chairman.
Well, I'm so glad that it did come up.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were, deterred from voting because of the long lines and not having a lot of options on when you could vote.
Yeah.
So I think that was a good initiative.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it, and it's something I want to take to Secretary of State. Not so much the idea of of of, of so it's the polls per se, because that's pretty much common practice now, but
Right.
the whole idea of making voting accessible to people. I really want to do
Okay. Well, we know that you are a politician, but you are also the executive director of the Global Youth Ambassadors Program. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So tell us about that.
So, Tina, I mean, anybody who meets me, maybe within 5 to 10 minutes of the conversation, the first thing they'll find out is my love for my children. So, I have two
Mhm.
children who are young adults. Both of them are in school. One is in graduate school. The other one is graduating in about 2 weeks from North Carolina A&T.
Oh, wait. Hold on. You have a child at North Carolina A&T?
She loves that Aggie Pride. I have no idea what
My,
that is.
my daughter is there. When I was telling you about my daughter
Oh
earlier before we
wow!
got on the
Like,
show,
yeah.
yeah, she's a first semester junior there.
Well,
Yeah.
well, my daughter is a senior, and she's had some great years at A&T.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so she graduated from Mays High School in Atlanta, and
Mhm.
she got accepted to several HBCUs, including Hampton and Spelman. But she wanted to go to North Carolina A&T and experience that Aggie pride, so she loves it. And my son went to Morehouse and undergrad, and now he's at Duke University in the School of Public Health.
Mhm.
So my other passion is travel. I love travel. I used to be the regional manager of Peace Corps, and I've traveled to 52 different countries around the world.
Oh
I
wow.
love traveling, and
Mhm.
I know not only have I passed that zest, love to my children, but I've passed it along to high school kids.
Mhm.
So, Tina, for the past 13 years, we provided international travel opportunities to high school students in Metro Atlanta. Many of them are in the city of Atlanta, and a lot of them have never been out of the state of Georgia. And so, just imagine never been to out of Georgia and get a chance to go to Brazil or South Africa,
Right.
Germany, China, Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, Turkey. Those are some of the countries that we've taken high school students to. And I tell you, I've seen these kids really transform in a matter of
Mm.
2 weeks of travel, or
Wow.
maybe even 12 days of travel,
Mhm.
because it's something about an international experience, for particularly for people who have had limited exposure,
Yeah.
and it builds confidence. It generates a zest for life and pursuit of um, of adventure, and
Mhm.
I love it. So I've done that for 13 years, and I teach at Spelman College. That's the other
Yeah.
thing that I love about teaching.
Okay. All right. So you are one of five Democratic candidates
Right,
for Georgia's Secretary of State.
right.
So my first question to you is why did you decide to run for this position?
Plain and simple, to protect the vote.
Mm.
I mean, the vote, particularly for Black and Brown people, is under siege in Georgia and across the country. Um, and it really is, when we're just honest, it really is, to me, a reaction to the browning of America.
Mm.
I will always say that diversity is our state is our is our um, is our benefit. It is our asset. It is something that we should celebrate, not only in the country but also in the state of Georgia.
Mhm.
It's our strength,
Yeah.
and there are some people who don't quite see it that way.
Mhm.
And there is a orchestrated attempt in Georgia and across the country to restrict, make it slightly more difficult for Black and Brown people to vote, because that's how Black and Brown people have representation on all levels of government. And
Mhm.
again, that's our strength. And to me, we benefit from the diversity of America in many ways. We also can benefit from it politically. And so I chose to run for Secretary of State because of that. But also there are many other aspects of the Secretary of State's office that could have a great impact on people. And I have a great vision for that office, and I'd be more than happy to share more details about it as we go on through the interview.
Can you discuss what are some of the duties and responsibilities of the Secretary of State?
So, good question. It's a question that I'm often asked because um, most people don't know about the full range of duties. They only know about the elections part, and even then, it's because of what happened 2 years ago when
Right.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
former president asked the current Secretary of State to find 11,700 plus votes in Fulton County
Right.
to overturn the election in Georgia. So it's an executive position. It's a position that's considered what's called a constitutional officer, meaning it's in the Georgia Constitution. It's mandated. It's a position that has a wide range of responsibilities, including but not limited to oversight of the elections division. So all 159 counties, each county administers its own election for officials in that jurisdiction, whether it's mayor of cities or county commissioners or um, school board members. Uh, those counties administer their election,
Mm-hmm.
but the Secretary of State's office oversees the whole
Overseas
process.
it. Okay.
Then there's voting. So everybody in Georgia who registers to vote and are assigned to precincts in certain counties, the Secretary of State's office manages those voter rolls. So has the power to designate Tina Dawson as an active voter versus an inactive voter.
Mm-hmm.
An inactive voter because you don't vote, or because you moved, or because somebody passes, that person passes away.
Right.
So manages the voter rolls. Then there's another area called the corporations division,
Mm-hmm.
which all small business owners. I'm a small business owner.
Mm-hmm.
I have to register every year to be legal in the state of Georgia. I pay a fee, registration fee. And so there are 1.1 million small businesses in Georgia, a
Wow.
large number.
Mm-hmm.
One of the highest number of small business ownerships than any state in the country, especially in proportion to our size.
Mm.
And a lot of about 35% of the small business owners are Black business owners, which is pretty high. Um, so that's the second area, the corporations division. Then there's licensing. So
Mm-hmm.
licensing boards, people who are doctors or dentists or architects or um, uh, electricians or welders or nurses, and even those in the hair industry who have certification requirements. So when you work a job or profession, you have to meet certain standards in terms of skills and in terms of knowledge. And so you have to be certified to be able to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And so a specific board oversees the certification of those people within that profession.
Mm-hmm.
But the Secretary of State's office convenes the meetings of those boards. So there are 42 of them. And then the last major area is the securities division.
Okay.
These are financial area, financial industry, financial advising, commercial real estate, banks, private equity. And so there are four main areas, or other areas as well, but those are the 4 main areas. So it's a wide range of duties that the Secretary of State's office oversees and assumes on behalf of Georgians.
So, Dr. Eaves, say you're talking to someone and you're talking to them about your platform and the current election, and the person says, I don't vote because I feel that my vote doesn't count, or my voice doesn't matter. What would you say to those people?
Yeah. Even you do hear that, Tina, as valid. And also sometimes voter participation is low.
Right.
Even in the mayor's race in Atlanta back in November of last year,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I think maybe 25% of the people voted who were
Right.
registered to vote.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my response to that person is nothing can be further from the truth. Yes, your one individual vote is small in proportion to everyone, but everyone's vote adds up to declare a winner in a race. And when you run for elected office, you have to get 50% of the vote plus one person. And I've actually personally been in an election in the past that I happened to win, that I won by 303 votes. And
Wow.
it's because on election day, I actually got out and did a lot of campaigning on election day. And I believe that that was the difference. I think I must have persuaded 305 people or 303 people to vote for me, because it probably would have been closer or I may have lost.
Right.
So it is almost like shares that you buy
Hmm.
to own a company. And so your vote is like a share. You
Hmm.
have an investment, you have something, a stake in the game, or skin in the game, and you do have the ability through your vote to have representation. And
Hmm.
those of us who represent you can influence your life. Whether you think you got all the independence in the world, that's not true.
Yeah.
You have independence within a box, but there's a box that's put around you by
Hmm.
laws and regulations and ordinances that public officials come up with these laws. And
Right.
so, and if you drive down the street and there's a pothole, okay, if you miss the independent, what you gonna do with that about that pothole? You're gonna call some official to get that pothole fixed. Or if the traffic light's not working, or if you
Right.
turn on your water and the water comes out as brown, or there's no street light on your streets, or if you dial 911 because of some emergency, that's politics. Elected
Hmm.
officials are the ones who are responsible for the regulation of our society.
Right.
Even police officers and fire departments all fall under government. And
Hmm.
so people can't, and people's vote can determine one direction versus another direction. And so
Right.
nothing can be further from the truth that your vote doesn't count.
You know, in the last election, we celebrated because for the first time, I don't know if it's ever, so you have to correct me, but I know for the first time since I've been in Georgia, we painted it blue. And
Yeah.
can you talk about the efforts behind that of what you think galvanized us to be able to win in the end to turn it blue?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been it's been the convergence of a lot of things that happen. First of all, the diversity of the state. Um, so I tell people this often. Georgia is actually one of the most diverse states in the country.
Hmm.
The U.S. Census came out in 2020, and it reported that 49% of Georgians are non-white. I
Wow.
grew up in the South, and I just wouldn't have ever thought that
Yeah.
Georgia would be mostly a majority,
49%.
49%, and
Wow.
32% of Georgia is black. So one third of one out of every three Georgians is black, and so um, we live in a very diverse state. I was so excited about the stats, I forgot your question.
Oh, oh, my question was,
Oh, my vote, yeah,
yeah, we turned it blue,
yes.
and
So
yeah, okay.
yeah, um, so demographics of the state, number one. Then number two, a lot of folks, including Stacey Abrams and a lady named Helen Butler, who many of you may not know, and others, registered a lot of people to vote in
Mm,
over the past 5, 6 years.
okay.
People who are kind of on the margins of society. Going back to your question about why my vote counts, or what
Hmm.
does it count? Well, people, or deliberate effort was made to register people to vote who typically don't vote.
Right.
And then you had, um, you really had and I'm a Democrat, you had a Republican candidate running for reelection in Donald Trump. And
Hmm.
a lot of people didn't like him.
Hmm.
Yes, he's got his Trumpsters who love him, but there are a lot of
Hmm.
people who don't like him.
Mm.
So I think it was just a combination of all of that that caused Georgia to flip. Now, people don't remember this, but Georgia actually used to be a Democratic state up to 2000 and I think 6. It
Really?
never had a Republican governor in Georgia until Sonny Perdue was elected in 2006. And same with senators and constitutional officers. So what happened was there was a shift in what the Democratic Party in the South. So Georgia was Democrat. Um, a few other states in the South actually had Democrats, but
Okay.
a lot of um, more conservative Democrats began to leave the Democratic Party and go to the Republican Party. And a
Okay.
lot of that was driven when Roy Barnes was governor back in 2002,
Mm-hmm.
2004, the whole issue of changing the Georgia flag, which was, I think it had a Confederate emblem on it.
Mm-hmm. It did.
And
Mm-hmm.
Governor Barnes championed changing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, and a lot of conservative white South Democrats switched parties. And so all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, Republicans gained control of the legislature, as well as the governor's mansion, and eventually all of the constitutional offices, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, etc. They switched over to Republican during
Okay.
this changeover in the state of Georgia.
Okay. So I think that's one situation where we can honestly say that it was a collective effort and how our votes do count, right? Because it took all of us, with them registering the people to vote that hadn't voted and their project that they had, but just all of us exercising our right to vote and really getting out. If, like you said, if we don't show up to the polls, that would have never happened. So I think, instead of looking at it as an individual effort to vote, it's really a collective effort. We're doing, like you said, one piece of it. Um,
Yeah, Tina, I mean, you described it perfectly. I mean, it is a collective effort, but the collective is made up of individual parts.
right.
And
Mhm.
so, with every part of the collective that is not a part of the collective, it becomes less. And
Right.
so, the more you have it, the larger the collective becomes.
Right. So let's discuss a little bit about your platform.
Yeah.
Um, when you become Georgia Secretary of State, I'm going to speak it into existence.
Right.
What are some of the changes or enhancements that you want to bring to that position?
Yeah, there are a lot, but I think that they kind of fall into maybe two or three categories.
Okay.
I do want to. I will spend a lot of time making voting accessible and protecting people's right to vote.
Yeah, that's huge.
Um, yeah. So right now, the good news about Georgia is it has one of the highest number of people registered to vote who
Okay.
are eligible to vote. So it's like 85% thereabout of people who are eligible to vote actually are registered to vote in Georgia. All right, that's the good news.
Mm-hmm.
The bad news is we have a very aggressive way of purging people from the voter rolls. So I'm going to put a lot of time into expanding the voter registration rolls. In other words, I really want 100% of all Georgians who are eligible to vote be registered to vote.
Okay.
I'm going to target college students. I'm going to target ex-offenders, people who come out of the prison system who lose their rights, and really work hard for them to have their voting rights restored,
Mm-hmm.
and other people in our community who don't really vote, because I want them to understand the importance of voting so that they can feel that they are part of the community, feel that they're just as important as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to be pushing initiative to get all the colleges to embrace sort of um, this program of 100% voter registration on their campuses,
Mm-hmm.
especially at HBCUs. I want
Yeah.
to push that, and I also want to work with ex-offenders to get them to be registered to vote. Um, I'm going to work with the local election boards in a very collaborative way to make sure that the voting process is very customer service oriented, it's efficient, it's transparent. I want
Mhm.
citizens on the local level to feel like if they want to observe the voting, obviously within reason, they can observe the whole voting process, the elections in their local communities, because right now there's a lot of trust. So
Yeah.
distrust. So I'm
Yeah.
going to put a lot of emphasis on increasing the number of people who register to vote. And then um, the corporations area, the small business development. So I mentioned earlier that Georgia has one of the highest percentages of people who have small businesses.
Mhm.
That's great news. I mean, 1.1 million small business
That's
owners.
amazing.
That's great news. That's basically 10% of the population, and
Mhm.
it's higher when you look at the adult population. So a lot of people
Mhm.
are small business owners. That's a great news. That's good news. The bad news is 20% of them fail within the first year,
Mm.
and then 30% fail within the second year. So basically, every 10 businesses that start, three of them fail. And so
Mm.
I want to spend a lot of time helping small business owners to be more successful, because most small business owners fail for a couple of reasons. Number one is they um, they don't do a good job with bookkeeping and cash flow, and
Mhm.
they don't do a good job at marketing their program or their services and their products. So I want to kind of develop sort of this ABC approach of what the ABCs of successful small business ownership. And then the other area that makes it difficult for small businesses to survive is access to capital. So as I mentioned about cash flow, or being able to borrow,
Right.
um, because
Mhm.
sometimes when you start up, you just got to borrow money until you have sufficient revenue,
Yeah.
and then you pay off the loan. Then once you become self-sufficient. Unfortunately, a lot of Black and brown business owners or startups don't have access to capital,
That is true.
and a lot of times the rules and the criteria that are established are almost inherently more difficult for uh, people from the Black community, especially if they don't have any cash on hand, or they have a challenged uh, credit history because they just happen to not have much money. And
Mhm.
so sometimes the rules of loan lending are skewed towards people who come from more privileged backgrounds. And so I
Right.
really want us to be more inclusive in our approach and make sure that people who deserve to get a chance should get a chance. They have a great idea, they just don't have the cash in the bank to support themselves off the bat. So I want to help them out. Um, and then there are three or four other initiatives. I mentioned earlier about the securities area, which
Mhm.
is the responsibility of the Secretary of State's office. I really want to diversify a lot of the financial industry. So, for example, commercial real estate, as well as private equity financing, those two areas are very underrepresented when it comes to
Mhm.
Black and brown people. And I don't think that that's fair and right in 2022 and
Right.
beyond. We just got to do something better. We got to do more.
Mhm.
And then let me go back to the corporations division. Um, Government gives contracts to companies and businesses to do work on its behalf.
Mhm.
So government can't do everything. So sometimes they have what's called a bid,
Mhm.
solicitation of bids for companies to say, all right, we gotta we got to do some construction in our building, renovation in our building. So government doesn't necessarily have anybody who's employed to do reconstruction of a building. You hire somebody to do it. It's cheaper to do it that way. But
Right.
you don't just choose a company just because you know that company and that company's owner is your friend. You have
Right.
a process. It's a competitive bidding or proposal process. And that process of giving grants and I'm sorry, contracts to business owners, there is a lot of underrepresentation of
Mhm.
Black people and brown people. And so again, I know I'm talking a lot about Black and brown in this conversation, but I'm only talking about it because Black and brown should be at the table,
Right.
just like with everybody else. We have the population here. We benefit as a state from it. our economy is strong because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to getting contracts, getting people to be in the areas of manufacturing and production and executive leadership is not as diverse as the worker bees are,
Mm.
and as the consumers are. We need to get more diversity in the production and the manufacturing and the grant receiving areas of this state.
Right. And then so when you target and you work with the small business owners, we could understand how that level of business happens, right? And to be able to get a seat at the table. Because, I have been talking to people recently about governmental contracts, biddings, proposals, and when you're starting your business, unless somebody teaches you or you have the avenue to, go to a class, you just don't know. And sometimes as small business owners, and this is you get to the point is the business running you or you running the business?
Yeah,
So, you want to get to the point where even if you start off the business is running you want to learn how to flip it and be able to effectively run the business. So yeah, I think those programs are very important.
oh yeah,
Me as a business owner, I'm over here nodding.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
do need those programs.
Yeah, think about it. I mean, during the pandemic, because I was a registered business owner,
Hmm.
I was able to get a PPP loan, a Paycheck Protection Program loan from the federal government. I got
Hmm.
a grant from the city of Atlanta. They had a program called the Resurgence Grants,
Hmm.
and there was some tough times during the pandemic, and
Right.
I didn't get a whole lot of money from it, but I got enough um, to keep a few people employed,
Hmm.
as well as help keep food on my table.
Right. Right. And then, I was talking to, I had to hire, recently I hired a bookkeeper, and I don't know why I waited so long because it's been a total different experience in running a business when I hired the bookkeeper. But he was
Yeah,
saying that a lot of people just did not understand the paperwork and how to apply for that. So,
yeah. Let me tell you,
mhm,
Tina, there were people who didn't apply because they were intimidated about the
yeah.
process. You
Hmm.
know, I have a PhD. I consider myself a pretty smart man, but I actually did have some help, and that's I was able to. I had to pay somebody to help me to be able to get
Hmm.
money, but there were so many people. I mean, that you know, I think that the good news about what the government did, federal government did during the pandemic, and local government, the good news is something was done. The bad news is that people who most needed the help did not get as much help as they could have
It's true.
because they just didn't have the support.
Right.
They didn't know how to do it. And it's just awful what happened in terms of how people who really should have gotten help did not get help.
Yeah.
And so I'll use my platform as Secretary of State to make sure that that will never happen in the state of Georgia again. And this is not just for Black and Brown people. This
Yeah.
is for um, women. This is for veterans. It's for anybody. It's for a white
Hmm.
male who needs help. I'm willing to do it, but I definitely want to make sure that those communities that are sometimes ignored, they are not ignored during my tenure as Secretary of State in Georgia.
We have one question that came in from a Mr. Richard Bradley. He
Yeah.
said, "Good evening, Mr. Eaves. Given the current climate around stolen, and he has that in quotations, elections, how will you beat back the rhetoric and noise to ensure your message gets across and ensure fair and accessible elections, especially for our Black and Brown people?"
Yeah, that's a great question that Richard Bradley asked. Proud Phi Beta Sigma man. I got on my blue suit today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, it's a multi-pronged approach, and
Mm.
so number one is I literally was actually interviewed on TV today, and I talked about how we may want to, um, in the short run, begin to use paper ballots, so hand marked paper ballots.
Mm.
It actually may sound like you're going back to an old era, but Georgia is actually unique. It's one of only a few states that have the touch tone screens,
Mm.
and there are different conspiracies floating around of how those machines can be hacked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I agree with the conspiracies, but I do believe that I want to make sure that in the short run, during my tenure, that everybody, the Richard Bradleys of the world, the Tina Dawsons of the world, feel that when you cast your vote, it counts. And probably one of the best ways to do it is having some combination of a hand marked ballot, and that means you actually you actually mark the ballot yourself. And believe it or not, you can actually count a hand marked ballot just as quickly as you can with the electronic machines.
Mm.
So I'm thinking about, that as a short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution, but a short-term solution. I want to make the voting process um, open, where if a citizen wants to watch the tabulation of the voting or the proceedings that go on, they can watch it, they can observe, but they can't interfere.
Right.
All right, so you can see it. And I also think that the totals of votes in a given day should be made public. Not so much, not that you disclose who was voted for, but the number of
Mm-hmm.
people voted at a particular precinct or within a certain county. That should be reported on a daily basis.
Okay.
Then, after the elections are done, I believe that we need to do some sort of audit. Um, so there are two types of audit. One is almost like a sample audit. A sample audit is you verify a certain percentage of the whole, and when you do the random sample of that, and you don't come up with any sort of inconsistencies or improprieties, you can make an assumption that there's nothing bad that occurred. So it's random.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can also do a full audit, and a full audit is literally counting all the ballots all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that some variation of that will have to happen in the future as well, because right now there is such a there's so much toxic there's so much toxic nature, there's toxicity out there.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats feel that there's voter suppression, and we believe it. Republicans believe that there's voter fraud,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole level of confidence and trust in voting is probably at a low right now. And I just think that some very deliberate actions need to be taken in the future to restore confidence. So again, maybe using a combination of the paper ballots,
Mm-hmm.
allowing people to observe the process, posting of the tabulation of results in real time. Again, not specifically John Doe versus Sally Ann,
Right.
but just the numbers. And then after the election, doing some combination of audits just to assure the public
Mm-hmm.
that this was done in a very transparent way, in a methodical way. And I just think we're going to have to do that for a couple of years until
Right.
people's level of confidence is increased or
Well,
restored.
well, I want to thank Richard Bradley for his question. Dr. Eaves, we're almost at the end. Is there any final thoughts that you would like to share with the viewers?
Yes. So thank you again, Tina, for this opportunity. I've
Thank
enjoyed the
you.
conversation. I just want to stress what you brought up at the beginning of your show. We are actually now in the middle or the beginning of early voting. It started on Monday, May the 2nd. It will go up through Saturday, I think May the 20th.
Mm-hmm.
You have 2 weekends in most jurisdictions, most counties to vote. During the week of early voting, the precincts are open from 9 to 5. If you're early voting, you should have already requested a ballot. You have to apply. You have to have an ID. And there's certain time constraints in which you apply for, and then you have to turn in your ballots once you get. So you have to apply for an absentee ballot. So if you're
Okay.
restricted, homebound, or whatever, you or college student, and you're not here, you can do absentee voting.
Okay.
But the in-person voting, can be done now, and then election day is May the 24th. And so please go out to vote. There are some good candidates running for all the offices on both the statewide and local levels. Go vote, do your homework, certainly look at my race, and I certainly hope that this evening and this interview I've conveyed to you that I am qualified and ready on day one to assume the office of Secretary of State and be successful and have impact on communities. And the last thing I want to say as I close out, there's a historical aspect of this election. With my success, this will be the first time that a Black person would be elected as Secretary of State of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And within the Southeast, there's only been one other person who's been elected, and that person was elected in Mississippi during Reconstruction. And so after Reconstruction fell in the 70s, then 1870s, that is, there's never been a Black person elected as Secretary of State in the South, and definitely not in Georgia.
Wow. But Dr. Eaves, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your platform with the viewers. I wish you much success. I will be following the race. Please reach out if there's anything that I can do. And blessings to you and your family.
Well, listen, thanks again, Tina. This has been fun and hopefully informative for your audience. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. We'll see you next Wednesday, same time, same place. Good night, everybody.
Bye.